Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Stockradar Stocks of the Move for another week. Today's date is the 8th of May 2024. My name is Richard Lee and I manage the stockradar.com.au website for you. Okay, interesting week. Some positives to come out this week. We've had some great new highs by some of our super trending stocks extending their trend into uncharted waters. We'll have a look at those a bit later on. Commodity sector, we've got gold, we've got copper, we've got even uranium. Not so much Brent, but we don't really have many oil stocks anyway. We don't have any oil stocks anyway at the moment, so that's okay. So it's an interesting market at the moment. Going through a bit of a corrective phase. A little bit unsure, but again, we take a stock-specific approach and we'll see what we can look at today for you. Okay, so have a look at a few miners and a few of the other stocks as well. But let's first go to the top 10 and see what we've got here first. Okay, the top 10, in there we have stalwart Wesfarmers, which is making new highs again. It's been up about $5 the last couple of weeks, from 65 to $70, and it's going gangbusters. Of there, we've got some miners. We've got Paladin, which is doing well. We've got Sandfire doing well. Orica's a bit better. Capricorn struggling a bit, but looking okay. And then we have a couple of other little smattering of stocks: Telix Communications, CPU, Computershare, and GQG. So a bit of a cross section there. QUB is a transport that stock's now broken up. So a good grouping in there with a few little miners in there. Okay, the stock big count at the moment. We're down 4 last week to 63. We had 2 in and 6 out last week. So that's come back a bit more. Again, we've really just been taking profit. As risk goes up and the market sort of goes sideways, we just take a bit of risk off the table and lock in a bit of profits, and that's fine. We can always re-enter again. Plenty of new stocks on the table, which I'll show you later on today. So we're just doing a little bit of that, which has been okay. So that's the stock pick count at the moment. We have 45 stocks of 156 stocks, so back on the low side again in that area. Okay, let's go to the markets. Okay, firstly the Dow Jones. They've all bounced back, the US markets. Dow Jones has come back here. It's found a bit of support. That low is probably what we look at now if we're going to see further downtrend, because that would create a lower high and a lower low, which is not a good sign. But for the moment, still holding. If we look at the S&P and the Nasdaq, similar pictures. They're both pretty strong, back towards their highs. They're resilient here. We've got some buyers that come back in here, although we had some heavy selling. We've got the buyers come back in again, so it's a bit of a battle, but the buyers are winning the battle at the moment, and the way the Nasdaq is going, it's almost back to its highs again too. So the panic is over for the moment. We'll just see how they go, but for the moment they look pretty strong, especially with those volume patterns at the moment. Our market recovered well so far this week. We've got this support bubble that I isolated last week. It's sort of held above there at the moment, which is a good sign. But we really want to see it back through these highs again, just to make sure this uptrend continues on its way. Another failure here, then we're going back to test support. Back to test support back here. But that's the area to hold, to watch for at the moment, the ASX 200. Okay, if we go to the gold commodity section now, gold is fine, holding its rally there pretty well, up a bit this week so far, and looking okay. Copper stocks also, or copper price as well, is also making new highs this week, so it's also looking pretty good. Looking towards that R2 section, we've got that good buying coming through here, so it looks pretty good. Copper, Brent's the stuffer of the whole thing, ruining the party. It's been weak again, and now our petrol prices are going up, but it seems weak, but anyway, go figure. So for Brent at the moment, it's still struggling and hasn't really done much. So it has a bit of a failure up here, and looks like we might be testing to go and test towards lower levels if the volume is any indication. So that's Brent crude for the moment. Okay, so that's the overseas markets there. We're not too concerned about what's happening over there at the moment. Commodities looking okay. Now we're going to look at some stocks. And we're going to go through a few miners this week. Friend or foe? Well, it's up to you how you find them. But it's a matter of being sensible when you trade in that market. We tend to stick to the big end of town. But we'll talk about that as we go through a bit today. But first off, I want to start with one industrial, which is Fisher & Paykel, which we did look at last week, which has now poked its nose above its resistance point here. If I just blow this up a little bit, and now you can see who it is. Okay, trend intensity rating is +3. If it holds this level here, it'll probably go to positive territory this week and do a trend reversal. We've got a fairly big pattern here, low here, a high low here. The market's rallied through the peak of those two troughs, which is looking pretty good. So it's looking like this is a fairly significant support resistance band through here. So we're now starting to break that. We're getting a bit of volume starting to show up down here, which is good. Momentum is strong, and also the average. So an interesting situation. situation here where the odds are now turning to the favour of Fisher and Paykel continuing this trend higher for the moment, and R2 is the obvious target there. Okay, so that's Fisher and Paykel we saw last week. Some of the mines I want to go through here. Mineral Resources, an interesting one, which is a little break up there a couple of weeks ago. It's now rallying strongly. You know, it's an interesting stock. When it moves, it can move pretty powerfully. So we're hoping that we're going to see something like R1, maybe even more, depending on how the commodities go. Volume again, not that fantastic. It's always a bit tricky with some of these mines, getting a hold of them. But we are above the average, and we have the momentum. So the weight of evidence gives me a trend intensity of +8 for Mineral Resources. So it's looking strong, as are some of the other miners. Okay, now the next one I will look at. Now these haven't really done much as yet. All I'm talking about here is a little bit of a whisker of interest. We're seeing here Iluka, which has had a pretty bad time. You can see if we go right back here, you can see the big trading range has been in for a very long time here, and that's going back to 2013. So we're down at the end, the bottom end of that. We found some support. And the stock is behaving interesting. It's above the average now. It's very hard to get a clear reversal point through here, but this is probably the level up around 8 to 8.15. A little bit of volume, momentum subsiding, so it's a very early day, still trend intensity of -6 there, but I think there's a pretty good sign here, and we probably are on the low of the cycle for Iluka, and that's a fairly important sort of price positioning for the stock to rally from. So this may just be the start of it. It may well come back again yet, but keep an eye on Iluka because it's starting to do the things that I like. And Linus is another one which has had a pretty tough time. $11 down to about just above $5.50. The downtrend is still firmly intact. We've got this little resistance bubble here, the switch zone I should say, where we rise above the average, the downtrend line and our horizontal resistance line, and that gives us some evidence there that we may be seeing a turn. We're getting a bit of volume interest here, and the subsiding of the selling is also apparent. So nothing really evident on the break side. Trend intensity is still -5, but we're getting close to some sort of change here potentially. So certainly worth keeping an eye on Linus. Okay, so these miners, we're digging a little bit deep today. Just have a look at some of these, see what we have got here. Pilbara Minerals again. I mean, most of these stocks had a pretty bad 23, but this has come back down to the low of its trading range. Has provided some resistance before, so it's a fairly important line here. The market hasn't really done much. There's not a lot of volume here. We've got a couple of good weeks up here with some green bars, which is a good sign. But I think ultimately I would be waiting for a resolution of this trading range before I would do anything at this stage. So this selling pressure has eased again. It is above the average, but really this resistance up here is pretty significant to me. So for Pilbara Minerals, and again, it's a certain stock that is a young stock that could go a long way, and the potential is pretty good. But again, we're using common sense here. We won't anticipate. We'll just keep an eye on what it's doing. And monitor it closely, okay, which is what we do, especially with our trading centre and all that sort of side of it. Okay, Rio Tinto is another interesting one, which is really up around this recent high from 2001, up around $136. We've got a nice little stepping stone here of highs here, which is good. We've got this consistent resistance area up here, so we like that when we've got the angle up, which certainly suggests the buyers might be a bit stronger, which is the natural inclination of the stock market anyway. But really, we're looking forward to get through this level here. It would certainly trigger a good reversal point here. We're getting a bit of volume starting to show here. Momentum is positive, and it is above the average. But really, the pricing is probably the most significant here because we've seen these swings before. What we really want to see is price trend, not just the indicators giving us an indication. So for Rio Tinto, it looks interesting, but it hasn't got there yet. But again, a lot of stocks that are in this situation are worth watching. South 32, this is a base metal stock. It's all of a sudden started to rally. It's come off from 290 up to around 360 in a pretty short period of time. So again, it's trying to reverse this big downturn it's had here for a while. We're getting some healthy interest through here. Again, the selling pressure is easing. So we're getting this picture here of the selling starting to go and the move. The price swings are starting to turn, but not quite getting us a killer knockout punch just yet. So South 32 is still, it has work to do. It is looking better. Trend intensity rating is still -7. It'll probably jump a bit next week as we get this price high, but we haven't got a reversal point here yet on this one, so we have to wait a little bit longer for South 32. But it's just looking interesting. Demand is appearing. Okay, I did mention to you before about Brent crude, And this chart here bears a striking resemblance to BHP's. Actually, we've got this big uptrend here that pushed into the old highs, then we went sideways for a while, sort of a distribution pattern, and BHP's now sort of started to break down a little bit here, although Santos hasn't. It's actually showing some good signs here with the volumes on the upside. This is pretty neutral, and also the moving average is neutral, but the price resistance here is strong. Even with the buying here that we've seen, it hasn't been able to push it through. So this is a real struggling area from here. Really, $9 is probably the area. If you really want to be careful about this, it would have to get through. But $8 certainly would be a pretty positive move for Santos. But at the moment, it's not happening, and the buyers can't get it through. So that's Santos at the moment, and the crude one, which we're staying away from. In the energy market, again, we've got this interesting stock, Whitehaven Coal, which always seems to be on people's radars. It's got a little resistance level here. We've come down to support. We saw the bad 2023, which brought it from 11 back down to 6, so it just about cut itself in half. And now we're starting to see some support appear. Nothing really evident. The volume's still a little bit thin. This has turned positive, moving averages turned positive, but price really, we will get a trend reversal above here, which would then signify a move back towards the highs. Trend intensity rating is +1 on Whitehaven, so it's still got some more work to do, but it's neutral and ready to move apparently. So keep an eye on Whitehaven Coal. It's another good one. One that I've looked at before, I think in the newsletter for members. We talked about this one. It's outside of my 160, but every now and then I like to have a look at one of these sorts of stocks. We do hold Paladin as a uranium stock in our energy sector, and that's doing quite nicely. But this one also, Bannerman, has now broken to new highs, as has Paladin, and is now starting to move well. Good volume, good momentum, and the average is up here. Is pointing up strongly, so that's a pretty good move. So this is a good breakout of a trading range, and we know where Bannerman has come from, a lot higher than this. So the potential of a stock like this is enormous, and risk is carried. The same balance of risk is carried along with that as well. But still, trend intensity rating +10. Move your stop up if you're trading it. Make sure you're not overly risking yourself or overexposing yourself, because these can be quite a lot of fun, these stocks, when they move. Okay, so that's Bannerman. So that's a few stocks for you, a few miners there to have a look at. I tend to, with what I do, because of my profile of my users, of my members, I tend to stick to the main, the top echelon of stocks. If I'm looking at copper, I'm looking at BHP and Sandfire. If I'm looking at some of the other stocks like Mineral Resources is more of a vertically integrated one. South 32 is more of a base metals. I've got Lines, which is rare earths, Aluka Critical Minerals. They're the top stocks in the echelon. You can go right down if you want to, but that's not really what I do. That's not my risk profile. So along those metals, I know there's not a lot of these stocks. There are some big stocks there, and BHP is a great one, and Rio, iron ore, and they're trying to beef up their copper area, which is interesting. So quite an exciting times in BHP, although the price has suffered a little bit. So it is interesting. But anyway, that's where I lie. I try to stick to the top stocks. I find it safer if I'm going to work in that area of metals. I did mention to you before some of the industrial stocks making new highs. Wesfarmers is one, which is just extending its trend further and further above $70. Goodman Group again has just started to make a new high again this week, so it's extending its gains, which have gone on for a long time. So they're the stocks that we really want in our portfolio. They just keep moving, we keep raising our stop. And when we have 5-stock portfolios, it takes up a 20% chunk of our market, so of our exposure. So it can be a pretty important part to do that sort of thing. So they're important stocks to us. Similarly, stocks that may well be getting to that area, maybe GQG, could be Sandfire, even little Telex, health stock, and then Paladin, uranium stocks, all doing it. And there are also some exciting moves, I think, by two other stocks. One is Mineral Resources, which I covered. I find that exciting one. And also AGL, which had a bit of a jump yesterday and is also looking quite interesting. And there are moves afoot there to change that stock. So I'm quite like all that sort of stuff. Okay, catches my eye, this sort of thing. Okay, so really with the mining stocks, as I said before, there's a safe way and a high risk way, and it depends on your profile, what you want to do. I have to look after my members, which have got a fairly conservative profile. It doesn't matter. We can still get good benefit from some of these stocks. Look at stocks like Sandfire, which have done really well and have moved really well, probably up 25-30% since we entered not long ago. So there's plenty of plenty of money to be made there. The safe way, the high risk way, it's up to you. That's going down the market cap scale. Into the dungeons, I should say, but it's an interesting area down there, and if you want to play down there, that's fine. So really, again, we're looking at the cycle of our commodities, and we can see that 23 was probably a bad year for most of them. So we look at that downtrend, we look for that support, which is what we're starting to get now on some of these stocks, whether it be Linus or Iluka or South 32, and then we look for the break higher. So that's where we're sort of at the moment. That's why I'm sort of talking to you about these today, because I think they're looking very interesting, some of these stocks. At the moment. So the mining stocks are responding to the commodity prices, which is good at the moment. The industrials are correcting, and the techs are at crazy levels for most of them. So that mining area is attracting a bit of interest at the moment. So when we look at a stock like BHP, it's actually moving a little bit counter trend to that at the moment. It may be due to this takeover that it's made a play for Anglo American, but you can see here it's a bit like the Santos chat we saw. We saw this good uptrend, running into resistance at the top there. And now it's started to come down a bit and started to flirt with this S1 area, which is not really a good sign. That we may need to see it come back down a bit further to gain some buyers back in there, because they might be a bit nervous about them paying too much. I think not, because that they will probably walk away before they pay too much. But they certainly would like those copper assets if they can get a hold of them. Anyway, so that's BHP. One that I'm sort of watching a little bit at the moment. We don't hold it, of course. But it's an interesting position that may come a bit lower yet. Okay, so with the mining and the miners, it's still all about odds and risk. Okay, trying to play those odds, and we're getting those odds shifting at the moment, and it lowers the risk. And so that's what we're always trying to do, heighten the odds and lower the risk, which is always our play. And that requires discipline to do that and not get distracted sometimes, which happens. So we've got to play the market sensibly. Don't take the big high risk punt, because that's always tempting. You think, well, this is going to go for sure, the chart looks great, but it's usually the one that will cost you big. And so that's a bit about discipline, about keeping in your lane and doing what you should do, and not getting too distracted by some potential wins there. Okay, so mostly it's common sense, and you don't need to be unnecessarily complex about this whole thing. We're just looking for swings, we're looking for trends. It's almost like you can feel and you can see the trend when they start and when they come off. We just got to take away our heightened emotions of the counting the money and things like that as we go through these trends. So it's just a matter of being fairly smart about it all. Okay, so that's just the miners, play it cool. So we're taking some time out for the mining stocks today, which is fair enough, but be careful. We play safe, as I said before, copper. We look at BHP, Sandfire, iron ore, BHP, Rio. Minerals are nice vertically integrated stocks, South 32 base metals. Whitehaven's a good coal stock, which is doing some great things despite the green movements. Linus, the rare earths, and look at the critical minerals. So stay big. That's how I do it. That's where I come from. Keep your risk reward in balance. As you slide down the MC scale, that gets quite dangerous. Not our risk profile. Okay, that's all I've got for today. An interesting week. We'll see what the commodities are going to do for this week. Again, also the market's up and down like a yo-yo at the moment. So, but remember that ultimately the trend is up at the moment. So that's where we lie as far as what we're doing. But that's not so important as picking out specific stocks, which I've been talking to you about today, and where I think some of the opportunities in those miners lie. There's plenty of other stocks doing really well, and you can look at all those in the trading centre if you want to do. I think I might have mentioned that. Well, you can also subscribe to our free blog, another article this week. You can also take a free trial of Stockradar, and so the newsletter was out last week for you to have a good read there. Okay, well that's all I've got for you today. Watch your trends, hedge your stops, stay safe, and hopefully I'll see you all next week. Okay, see you.